Hello and welcome to my demonstration on the Axi Path III Recorder. Today we'll be locating the true Hinge Axis, recording the protrusive pathway, and measuring the Bennett pathway. First we'll start with the head frame. The head frame looks a lot like a face bow, and we have a Nasion relator that normally is put in the upward position for a face bow, but today we're going to put it in the downward position for the head frame for the Axi Path Recorder. At this point, we do like to have the patient reach up and grab by the sides here. We want you to put this on top of your ears like sunglasses and push it against your head tightly. Now tighten the large screw, and then we go ahead and take it back away. And inevitably, the graph supports might be slightly canted, and we want those actually parallel to each other so that when the writing stylus comes into the graph paper, it's at right angles. So I'm going to go ahead and use a ruler here. We can place the ruler up against these graph supports, and then we can use that as a guide to push these back down or up so that they are level or parallel to each other. Once we're at that position, we can go ahead and tighten these screws tightly to maintain that position. So the head frame is ready to go, so I'm going to set this aside at this time. I do want to discuss briefly the recording arms. Originally, we had the Axi Path I recorder, which had a lead screw type recording arm. The lead screw here would adjust it in and out, and of course the lead screw here on the bottom would adjust it up and down, and it would be able to make micro adjustments. But we found many people were not close to the hinge axis when they're trying to micro adjust these and locate it, so we developed the Axi Path II recorder. The Axi Path II recorder has a frictionability arm. It has friction built into the arm for in and out, and when we tighten the large screw onto the cross rod, it'll adjust the tension up and down. This way we can go to the extreme borders of the graph paper and see the arcs of rotation and then dial in from there. With the Axi Path III recorder, we developed an arm that actually does both. It has the frictionability for in and out as well as up and down. And then we can switch to micro adjustment lead screws here on the back as well as on the bottom for adjusting in and out and up and down for micro adjustments. So I'll be demonstrating the Axi Path III arm today. Now we can go ahead and get our clutch ready, and we have a disposable clutch. It's a plastic clutch. And it does come with 3 different size disc loaders. So we have a small, medium, and large disc loader. There's also a disc loader in the clutch, which would be flat here. So we can also use that as well. If we have the patient's models, which I do, we can try the clutch onto the model and see how it fits. And it looks like I need to do a little relief here. We also want to check on the patient open, make sure they don't have any exostoses. So when we seat this clutch down, we're not impinging on that. So we're going to go ahead and cut this clutch back. Since my patient has a full set of teeth, we do not need the full clutch. We can cut it back. If your patient does not have a full set of teeth or a lot of missing teeth or very short crown height, you may want to leave the clutch full length. So I'm going to go ahead and use a safe-sided diamond disc and go ahead and cut the distal extensions of this clutch back and use an arbor band to smooth off any area. Like to round out the corners a little bit. And the clutch was impinging on her gingival tissue on the lingual here a little bit, so I'm going to relieve some of this in the back. And we just kind of grind on the inside here a little bit to relieve that. And I'm going to shorten the height just a little bit in the back too. I could tell with the study model it was kind of hitting the tissue there a little bit. So we want to make sure we can seat this clutch all the way down to the occlusal surface of the teeth. This way it'll make it easier to remove the clutch when we are done with the recording procedures. What we like to do first is take a little periphery wax. Take a little bit of this periphery wax, and we like to line the top surface of the clutch. This is where the disc loader is going to go in these 2 holes, but sometimes it comes a little bit loose, so we like to just smear the very thin layer of the periphery wax right there where the disc glue is going to go, and that'll help hold that in place. And then I'll take another section right here through the midline and place a nice chunk of wax right there in the midline of the patient. This will help, again, separate the clutch and make it easier for removal later. When we seat this in the mouth, we'll create a little index here, which will help us re-index it back in the mouth where we want it. So I'll go ahead and add discluder. Go ahead and bite your teeth together. She has a fairly good amount of overbite, so I'm going to use a fairly small discluder. I'm going to start with the small one. We can always change these later if you need to. We're going to check to see how much disclusion there is. So first you want to pop the discluder into one hole, line it over the other one, snap it into place. Now we have a cross rod. We have a cross rod here and a cross rod clamp. The clamp does have a bevel to it, and that bevel needs to go towards the patient. So I'm going to put it onto the clutch with the bevel towards the patient. That way, when she moves, her teeth would not hit the clutch clamp. Now we can go ahead and rotate this rod, and it might sound like it's cracking. Don't worry about that. We just kind of rotate this through until we get the knurl area here right underneath the screws. And then we want to just finger tighten these. We don't want to tighten them too tight because the clutch is plastic and we might break it. We just want to finger tight it so that it won't rotate within the clutch. Now we can go ahead and try this in the patient's mouth and see if we can seat it all the way down to the occlusal surface. There we go. That's a little better. How's that feel? It's okay? So make sure I'm seeing it all the way down. Okay, so now we recommend using a little plaster in here to fix it to the lower teeth so we have a solid support. You could probably use a different type of material, but some of these materials are a little bit spongy, and as they bite on this, the arm or the cross rod will flex a little bit, which would make the recording arm flex quite a bit also. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and mix a little bit of plaster. We're going to put it into the clutch. We're going to seat this down over her teeth. We do want to make sure that the cross rod is somewhat perpendicular to the facial midline. If it's canted too much, we may not have enough room with our recording arm to reach our recording plate, or it might be too short here to reach the recording plate. So we just want it somewhat perpendicular to the facial midline. So I'm going to go ahead and mix the plaster at this time. I am using a Kerr number 2 quick set plaster. You could use a little potassium sulfate as you get more proficient in these procedures to make it set up a little bit faster. Go ahead and add some plaster into the clutch. You don't want to add too much because you might have to clean some up. So I'm just going to put a little bit in there. And we'll go ahead and seat the clutch over her lower teeth. There, we're going to push that down all the way. All right. We're going to hold that all the way down to her occlusal surface until the plaster sets. I can see that the cross rod is right angles to her face. So I'm just going to hold that in place for a few minutes. Okay, at this time I think the material is pretty much set. There'll be a little bit of plaster maybe oozes up through the holes. So I'm going to take a little cotton pliers and remove any of those little spicules of plaster. Could you just reach up with this rubber bowl and hold that right up her mouth there for me? Right there, get that one. Okay, I think we have it there. Go ahead and bite lightly and slide forward and slide back. Slide to your left and to your right. Just real slow, easy movements. To the other way. Come all the way the other way. Slide forward, slide back. I'm looking to see if she's touching the clutch anywhere. Go ahead and slide forward, slide back. Looks good on that side. And go ahead and slide forward, slide back, all the way forward, Doesn't look like it's touching there either. So we have the clutch in place. So go ahead and remove this for you. Now we can go ahead with the head frame. Again, I want you to reach up and grab it by the side and put it on your ears like a pair of sunglasses. And we go ahead and make sure that's tight. I can push the nasion relator up here just a little bit up against her nasion. And tighten the large screw there. Is that all the way back? Can you push it back? There we go. Then we have the elastic band here. We're going to come back around the back of her head. You want to go below the occipital bulge so it doesn't slide up. And we want to go one hole past the flaccid position. So we go up to about there. And then we also have a little head strap that some people like to use. And the head strap would go on top of the head. And we can put these little Velcro straps on. And then there's one in the back we can bring up to the front. Okay, now the head frame's set. You can let go now. We do want to make sure that the graft supports are covering the tragus of the ear. We do also have the graft papers. And we can add those to the graft supports. And there is a little alignment grid here at the very top that you can set the paper to, and then just kind of let it follow the graft support itself. So now we have the graft papers on. Now we have our writing styluses. The writing styluses, we'll go ahead and remove the little lead holders. And we have our recording arm. And we do want to push the stylus in towards where the scale starts here and push that all the way in and back it up about 3 to 4 millimeters. This will allow us enough room to add our writing lead holder in here. It'll also give us some room to bring the stylus up to the skin once we remove the head frame. So I'm going to set up both recording arms this way. Again, I'm going to push this all the way in, back it up about 3 or 4 millimeters, and tighten it. If you look on the recording arm itself, you can see there's a little line on the shaft as you adjust it in or out. That's a midway point line, so we want to adjust the recording arm so that line lines up with the housing of the second part of the arm. And that makes sure we have enough adjustment out as well as in for locating the axis. We also want to make sure that the housing here is parallel to each other. If it's canted like this, we may not have enough adjustment up and down, so we want to start it with the two housings parallel to each other. So again, we have enough room for adjustments. So that recording arm is ready to go for the patient's left side. And we have this one, I'll readjust it. So I got the 0 line here. I look at the housings and I go ahead and make that parallel to each other. So we're ready to go. So let's start with the recording arm on the patient's left side. We can just slide the recording arm onto the cross rod here. And we go up till the stylus touches the paper in any position, and then tighten the large screw with the spring on it all the way down, and then back it up about 1/4 of a turn. And that way you can adjust the tension. If it's too loose, you can tighten it just a little bit more to create a little more tension. The tension is built into the recording arm clamp for the in and out motion. So we adjust the large screw here just to adjust the tension for the up and down. I'll go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Again, tighten the large screw with the spring until it's all the way tight. Then we'll back it up maybe 1/4 of a turn or until we have the right tension we like for the up and down motion. All right, we're going to go ahead and start to locate the true hinge axis. And we're on the patient's right side here. And I'm going to push so the stylus is all the way up to what we call the 12 o'clock position here on the graph paper. We don't want to just grab their chin and open and close. What we want to do is just apply a little bit of pressure to keep them from translating during the opening and closing process. If you've deprogrammed the patient, you may not have to apply that much pressure. If you haven't, you may have to apply a little bit more pressure just to keep them from translating. So again, I'm just going to have her go back. I'll move the stylus to the 12 o'clock arc and just have her open and close it slowly. And we can see it arcing up there in the 12 o'clock position. At that point, I'll go ahead and move the stylus all the way down to the 6 o'clock position down here. And again, I'll just have her open and close lightly, and we can see it arcing down there at the bottom. So we know that somewhere halfway in between is going to be the axis. So I'm going to come all the way forward to a 3 o'clock position. Again, have her open and close a little bit. We can see it arcing in that position. And then I'm going to scoot it all the way back and have her again open and close. And we can see it arcing slightly in the 9 o'clock position. So we know that the axis is somewhere in between the crosshairs. Now, a lot of times the axis is right on the tragus. So we do want to make sure our graft supports are covering the tragus. So I'm just going to loosen this and let this come back just a little bit more over her tragus, just in case. So now I'm going to move this back where I've split the difference vertically and forward. It's right above her tragus there. I'm going to go ahead and have her open and close slightly, and we can see it moving slightly, a little bit in this direction. If you look at my graphic in the patient's right side here, if the mandible could continually open, it would create a clockwise rotation. Therefore, if the stylus is in front of the axis, like the lower teeth, when she opens, we'd see the stylus move down. Of course, if the stylus is behind the axis and we look at opening movement only, the stylus goes up slightly. So if we look at only one movement, the opening movement, and it creates a clockwise rotation, it'll always be a 90-degree right-hand turn to the axis. So let's go ahead and try this. We'll go again and put this right above her tragus here. And I'll just apply just a little bit of pressure to the chin and just have her open and close a little bit more. There you go. We can see it in opening movement, it's going up slightly. So if it's going up slightly, we're behind the axis, we need to come forward. So at this point, I'm pretty close to the axis. I'm going to go ahead and tighten both screws on the top, which will lock down the macro or frictionability portion of this recording arm. Now we can switch to micro adjustment lead screws for up and down movement, or we can do forward and backward movement. So again, I'm just going to look, have her open and close. Looks like it's going up slightly in opening. So I'm going to come forward with the stylus, and I think maybe just a little bit up. Again, looks like again it's still going slightly up during opening. So again, I'm going to move it forward. And then check it again. And it looks like now it's going a little bit backward. So 90-degree turn would be upward. So I'm going to move this slightly upward. And once again, open and close. Now we can see that stylus just basically pivoting at her true hinge axis point. When we go to the patient's left side, opening movement would create a counterclockwise rotation. Therefore, it'd always be a 90-degree left-hand turn to the axis. So the patient's right side is a 90-degree turn to the axis. Patient's left side is a 90-degree left turn to the axis when looking only at the opening movement. So I'm going to go ahead and locate the true hinge axis on the other side this time real quick. You just stay there. I'm going to bring this down right over the tragus of her ear. I'm going to go ahead and lock down the frictionability portion of the arm. And again, I'm just going to have her open and close slightly. Looks like it's going up a little bit, so I'm going to come forward. And then again, open and close. Again, it's going slightly up, so I'm going to come forward, left turn, and forward slightly. Okay. Now it's looking like it's just rotating like it was on the right side. So we have located the true hinge axis on both the left and right side. At this time, I'd like to show you how to set up your writing lead holders. And we do have a little mandrel kit here in the recorder kit, which has a sharpening mandrel and a little lead holder removal tool. So I'm going to show you how to change the lead. If you broke your lead off here, we want to replace it. So we first have this little tool that looks like a little spring on the end. We can use this to help push the pencil lead out that may be broken off. So now we have the pencil lead out. We do have a sharpening mandrel. It does have a little line here on the mandrel. So we'll push this little lead holder just to that line. Then we can go ahead and get a new pencil lead. So now with the lead holder at that line, we can push this lead in till it hits the sharpening mandrel. So I push that all the way in till it's hit the mandrel. And now I can just break off that lead right flush with that lead holder. Now when I push the lead holder all the way onto the mandrel, it'll push that lead out approximately 3 millimeters. So I have a little sandpaper disc. I got my lead. I like to hold it about 60-degree angle. And we can go ahead and sharpen that lead to a nice little sharp point to record a nice pathway on the patient. So now we can go ahead and pull the stylus back, and that gives us room to add our lead holder to the end of the pin, and we push that right onto the lead holder. I'll do that to the other side as well. And now we can go ahead and start the recording process. We like to first retract this away, tighten the small screw here in the back. Then we got a little elastic band here on the stylus. We can clip that over the screw. Now I want to hold the stylus as I loosen the screw, otherwise that would shoot up against the paper and it might break the lead. So I like to hold this, loosen the screw, and slowly release it up to the graph paper. We could do this also to the other side. Now the screw's loose. You want to have the patient go ahead and slide their jaw all the way forward, slowly forward, all the way, and back. All the way back. All the way back. There you go. And one more time, all the way forward, and all the way back. You can see a beautiful protrusive pathway there. So I'm going to go ahead and retract the stylus away from the paper, tighten the little screw, and release the elastic band. Now I can actually loosen the screw again. I'm going to do this on both sides. Now we like to do a little diagnostics. I want to see if the patient's opening movement is the same as their protrusive movement. So slide your jaw forward and all the way back, all the way back. Then I'm going to go ahead and put the stylus up against the paper, and now I want to have the patient slowly open their mouth. Slowly open all the way, and it looks like it's the same pathway all the way out. Go ahead and close. Sometimes you'll have a little bit of difference in the pathway, but most of the time you'll see the same pathway at least during the functional range. Sometimes you get a little bit of fissure angle the further you go out, which might be the shape of the condyle. As you go in protrusion, it's riding on one portion, and as you open, it might be riding on a different portion of the condyle. So it's very diagnostic to say that we locate the axis fairly accurately. It also shows us that their condyle is probably fairly rounded in shape. So I'm going to go ahead and test this on the other side as well. Slide back, all the way back. There you go, and then open your mouth slowly. And it's the same pathway on this side as well. So a nice healthy joint. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and try to measure the Bennett movement. We want to measure the Bennett movement in the functional range. The functional range when you move laterally is about 3 millimeters when you're canine to canine. The Bennett movement is the inward portion of the condyle as you move laterally. So on a horizontal line from the apex where she started recording, I'm going to measure forward 3 millimeters. 1, 2, 3 millimeters, and then come down to where it intersects her pathway and make a little glitch line, and that's where I'm going to measure the Bennett movement. So we have the patient slide forward all the way back. We go ahead and push the stylus up against the graph paper. We push the Bennett ring up against the side of the arm. We have the patient move slowly to the left, get to that large stop right there. And we can see there's no Bennett movement when she's chewing soft food or nothing between the teeth. I'll go ahead and place my finger at the angle of the mandible and thumb here, hand on the opposite side of the head. And I'm going to push at a vector towards the working side condyle and just apply a little bit of pressure. And that opened it up to about 1 millimeter, maybe a little bit over a millimeter. So we're going to do this 3 times and take the highest reading. So go ahead and slide your jaw forward and back, all the way back, right there. Again, I'm going to slide the Bennett ring back, push up the pencil lead, push up the Bennett ring. I'm going to guide her slowly to the left. Keep going, slowly, a little bit more, and stop. We can see that the Bennett ring did not separate, so she does not have Bennett movement when chewing soft foods. Again, finger at the angle of the mandible. I'm going to just push in lightly, and we can see that popped open about 1 millimeter, maybe just a little bit over 1 millimeter. So I'm going to do it one more time. Slide back forward and all the way back. There you go. Push up the pencil, push the Bennett ring. Again, slowly to the left. Keep going, and stop. Hold it right there. Again, no separation of the Bennett ring. Angle of the mandible. I'm going to push this a little bit harder this time. And I got 1.5 millimeters. So I'm going to take the highest reading. The patient's right side has 1.5 millimeter Bennett movement. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. So on the patient's left side, I'm going to count forward 1, 2, 3 millimeters. Bring a line straight down where it intersects the patient's pathway. Make a little mark here where we're going to measure the Bennett movement. Go ahead and slide forward and slide back. And go ahead and slide forward, all the way forward. We can see how we trace that protrusive pathway. Slide back. And then I want you to open slowly. And we can see the opening movement is basically the same also. All the way back. There you go. Now we push the lead up against the paper. We push the Bennett ring against the side of the sidearm. I have the patient move slowly to the right. Slowly, stop. And on this side, she has maybe 1/4 to 1/2 millimeter Bennett movement when she's chewing soft foods. Now I'll go ahead and put my finger at the angle of the mandible, and I'll give a slight push. And that pops open to almost 2 millimeters. So we'll go ahead and do this 3 times. So again, we push the lead up against the paper, push the Bennett ring up against the sidearm, have the patient move slowly to the right, slowly, just keep going slowly, and stop right about there. And we can see a slight separation in the Bennett ring, almost 1 millimeter, about 3/4 of a millimeter. Now I'll go ahead and put my finger at the angle of the mandible, push upward and inward slightly, and we can see that pop open to 1.5 millimeters, 1 3/4. So I'm going to do it one more time and take the highest reading. Go ahead and slide your jaw forward and all the way back. All the way back, I push up the stylus against the paper, push the Bennett ring against the sidearm. Again, move your jaw slowly to the right. Slowly, keep going, and right about there, stop. Again, we can see the Bennett ring opened up almost 1 millimeter. So that's diagnostic. I'm going to go ahead and push the angle of the mandible, maybe just a little bit harder. And we did get it to 2 millimeters. So the patient's right side is 1.5 millimeter Bennett movement. The patient's left side is going to be a 2 millimeter Bennett movement. Okay, we're done with the recording procedure. We've located the true hinge axis. We traced our protrusive pathway. We verified that opening pathway is the same as protrusive pathway, and we've also measured the Bennett movement. So we can go ahead and remove the head frame at this point, but we want to leave the recording arms on because we want to transfer this hinge axis to the skin for our true hinge axis transfer procedures. Now, before we take off the head frame, we don't want to loosen the screw and inadvertently change the facial width. We also don't want to loosen this screw and change the third point of reference, which is going to be from Nasion. So I do like to mark the shaft here with a little pencil line. So if I inadvertently loosen that screw, I can come back to that. I can also mark the front of the face bow here with a pencil line. So if I inadvertently loosen this screw and it changes, I can bring it back to where it was. So now we'll go ahead and remove the head strap. And go ahead and release the elastic band here on this side. At this point, I do like to have the patient reach up again, all the way up to the bow, and pull this slowly forward. I do this so I don't pull their hair, which sometimes it does. There we go. And so we have this. We haven't changed anything. We want to keep this like this to prepare for scribing our Axis orbital reference line on here. So we're going to keep this off to the side until we do that procedure. Now we want to go ahead and mark the skin so we can transfer the true hinge axis. We do like to use a little bit of marking dye. This is US government grade marking dye. And you can take a little bender brush and we can apply a little bit of the ink either to the lead, or we can remove the lead holder. And then we should still be able to reach the skin because we backed this off 3 or 4 millimeters before we started. So I'm going to remove the lead holder on this side. I want you to slide forward and all the way back, all the way back. One more time, slide forward and all the way back and hold it right there. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit of this dye onto the bender brush. And I'll go ahead and mark, put a little bit of this dye right onto the pin. And I'll go up and make a little spot on the skin. Slide forward and all the way back. And I go up and I verify that it is the same point. I'll go ahead and do this on the other side. Go ahead and remove the lead holder. Then slide our Bennett ring back. We should have enough extension to reach the skin. If we do not have enough extension to reach the skin, and this one's really close, we can actually remove the stylus and remove the Bennett ring. And with the Bennett ring removed, now that gives us a little bit extra room to reach the skin there. So again, I'm just going to place a little bit of dye on the tip of the point here. Slide forward and all the way back. Stay right there. Deposit a little. Might have to get a little bit more dye. There we go. And we get a little spot there. Slide forward and all the way back. And I verified that it is the same point. So now we have the true hinge axis marked on the skin. If you want to go ahead and use like a 27 gauge infiltration needle to mark this permanently or semi-permanently, at least through the patient treatment, you do want to alcohol the skin first before applying the dot to the skin. So normally we would alcohol the skin first, put the dye onto the pin, mark the spot on the skin, and then we can use like a 27 gauge infiltration needle to go ahead and mark that. You can also use a ruler on this and take a photograph. Maybe place the ruler to the tragus line or to the canthus of the eye to the tragus and measure where the spot is so you can come back to it because you may not be able to find it later. So now we're done with the complete recording procedure. We can now go ahead and remove the clutch. First, what we like to do is go ahead and loosen the large screw all the way with the spring, and that allows us to remove the recording arm. And so I'll do that to this side as well. Now we want to go ahead and loosen these screws. And we want to kind of grab this clamp a little bit as we want to rotate this cross rod out of the clutch. And remove the clutch clamp as well. Now we ask for the gold-handled clutch remover. The gold-handled clutch remover looks a lot like a Stanley stubby screwdriver, but we never ask for a screwdriver in front of the patient. So we ask for the gold-handled clutch remover and we palm that. If we look inside here, there is a little slot on the back side of the clutch in here. that the screwdriver can go into. And then we can turn this, and the clutch is made to break into 4 different parts. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and grab a little rubber ball, and I would like you to hold this up here. And then what I like to do is pull the lower lip down so that that's not going to interfere with any tool or hurt their lip in any way. We put the screwdriver right into that slot, and we give it a little turn, which will crack the clutch and break it. And then we can go ahead and remove the clutch portion of that. Then we go ahead and ask the patient if they can bite down real hard and slide forward and back. Just slide forward and back, and it'll start to break that loose. Do it again. Just slide forward and back a little bit. I can see it breaking loose there. There, it's busted loose off the lingual. A little bit more, bite down and chew around a little bit. So now we're going to look to make sure that it got most of the plaster off. Looks really good. Hello, welcome back. We're here to finish our Hinge Axis recording procedures by scribing our axis orbital reference line and reading our protrusive pathway angulation. To do that, what I like to do is utilize the articulator as a support stand. So I raise the support pin, I take off the rubber cap, then I can attach the head frame to the top of the support pin and tighten it in place. For this also, we want to make sure that our pencil line we scribed on the bow hasn't changed, and that the line on the Nasion shaft here hasn't changed also. So they both look good. For this, we need to add our 3rd point of reference tool. This is a little clamp that'll go on right behind the Nasion relator here. And we can tighten that into place. And that'll bring our 3rd point of reference 22 millimeters below Nasion to where there's a little dimple point here in the back side of this little clamp assembly. That little dimple will take the little point here that's on our reference tool, and there's a little spring to it. So you pull out the spring, and then we can hook that into the little dimple onto the reference clamp. And now that allows the reference tool to pivot around our 3rd point of reference. We can now go ahead and spring this out over the graph supports and put it up at a high position. We do have little reference tool support clamps, so I'm going to put these on, and I like to put them on with the screw towards the inside so I don't scratch the paper. So I'm just going to put that on the bottom side on both sides. Then we want to adjust our reference tool to the top of the protrusive pathway apex. So we need to adjust our reference tool to the top of the apex, the starting point here of the patient's protrusive pathway. So I can move the reference tool up to that and adjust the clamp that supports that to that position. And tighten it in place. I'll go ahead and do the same thing to the opposite side. And so I need to raise this up just a little bit, adjust the clamp. And when you got the apex just right on this side, we do need to double check the other side, because as you adjust one side, it may affect the other. So I want to make sure that it's at the top of the apex here also, and that looks pretty good. And I'll double check it here, and that looks good. So we can go ahead and take a pencil now and scribe our axis orbital reference line. And we do that on both sides. Now some people say, couldn't you use a ruler to scribe this reference line? If you look at this, we can see the reference tool is slightly canted because the axis does not go through the head straight. If the axis went through the head straight, we could probably use a ruler, but many times the axis goes through the head at a slight angle. So you need a reference tool that can pivot around that 3rd point of reference to get back to the apex of the hinge axis. So now we can go ahead and remove this reference tool and the clamps. And then we can also remove our graph papers. I like to peel these off slowly to prevent them from tearing. And we can put those onto a piece of paper or the patient's chart. So we have that there. We can now remove the head frame from the articulator. And all these components can go back in the Axi Path Recorder kit. To now read our protrusive pathway angulation, we're going to utilize the Panadent Axi Path protractor. The protractor does have a 3/4 inch protrusive pathway lines for left and right. And we'll take those and we'll superimpose that line over the patient's protrusive pathway line, starting at the apex or where they started their protrusive pathway. Then we can rotate that around that apex, following the protrusive pathway at least through the functional range. And then we can read the line out. And on this side, the angulation is going to be a number 8. So on the graph paper here, I like to put the angle equals 8. And the Bennett movement on the patient's left side was 2.0 millimeter. So now we can go ahead and do this on the right side. Starting at the apex here, in the apex of the patient's protrusive pathway, we rotate up to the highest line, following the highest line through the functional range. And then we can go ahead and read that line out. And on this side, it looks like it's also going to be 8. Just verify that real quick. Read it on out. And we have an 8. So again, the angle equals 8, but the Bennett on the patient's right side equaled 1.5 millimeters. So now we have the analog size on the patient's right side. We want to choose at least a 1.5 millimeter analog. And on the patient's left side, we want to choose at least a 2.0 millimeter analog, and we'll set the angulation both at 8. And that completes the Axi Path recording procedures. Thank you.